Hello. Okay, so welcome to the first edition of the Cardea work group of 2022. Very exciting. And let me share my screen. We will walk through a couple of our housekeeping items and get started. All right. So, oh, and we have a little puppy who's joined us, it sounds like.
Oh, sorry.
All right. So the first and foremost important thing is that today's meeting is covered by the Linux Foundation antitrust policy. These are our meeting notes. I will put them in our chat so that you can access them, including all the links that I have here for you, which is the antitrust policy. You can go to the Linux Foundation website for that. Additionally, the Cardea Code of Conduct is also in play for today's meeting. The gist of that policy is to be nice to each other, to allow each other to speak and have a voice and encourage participation. If there are any issues or concerns with these policies, you can reach out to myself as a co-chair or Ken, who's not with us today, or to Linux Foundation directly if there's an issue with one of us as the chairs. So we have a couple of things on the agenda today. I think first and foremost, we want to do a quick technical update around Interopathon readiness, technical readiness. And I think, Mike, you can give us a quick update on that. I have two things for us to touch on, but we may want to, if there's anything else, I could be taking notes on that as well.
Okay, so there are a couple housekeeping items that the tech team has to do before we can release documentation and reference implementations and things like that. And we have two main technical goals for this Interopathon. We're going to test everything that we have done previously. And then in addition to that, we're going to add, we're going to work on changing how connections are established. We'll be using the out-of-band and DID exchange protocols to accomplish that. That's the first technical goal. And the second one is we'd like to bring at least a rudimentary level of machine-readable governance to the participating agents. So we have done, we have used some machine-readable governance in a trial, and we're working on the new protocol to have an example for everyone to look at for how that's going to work. And so the goal right now is to have reference implementations and documentation ready by the end of this month, so that everyone on the call and who's going to participate will have about a month as well to go and make changes and updates and do their own internal testing. And so that puts the Interopathon somewhere at the end of February or early in March is about when the timeline for getting this stuff to happen is looking.
And that was both for the technical documentation and the reference implementation would be ready about the end of January?
That's the goal, yes.
Okay, excellent. Great. And in terms of what we had discussed before, and this is what Mike was just hinting at, we have previously said that it probably needs about a month to 6 weeks once those become available for people to be able to take advantage of them, and then be ready for the Interopathon to make sure that they've had a chance to test, to have some office hours in preparation for that Interopathon. And so that's why we're looking at an end of Feb, early March timeline. Does anybody have comments on sort of how that's being scheduled timeline wise? I think from my perspective, it's probably a really good goal because it gives us a little wiggle and we could still get it done within Q1, which would probably be valuable here.
Yeah, last time we did the Interopathon, we really had to crunch to get it out, and most of the participants had, barely 2 weeks at best to try and get something done. And there were things ended up a little rough around the edges as a result. And I think that if we give everybody a little longer to tinker with things, that would be helpful to ensure, excuse me, ensure a smooth result.
Absolutely. Helen, do you have something you want to chime in on?
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about is offering office hours, so folks who are going to participate in the Interopathon themselves would be able to pop in and walk through the reference of the testing requirements. So if the technical documentation is done at the end of January, let's assume that's when we'll do the announcement, saying, sign up here, here's the, technical documentation. It'd be great to have that all as one package, and then offer office hours, maybe once a week in between the weeks leading up to, from the announcement to the actual Interopathon. And then hopefully when the Interopathon happens, everything goes smoothly. So just thinking about timeline.
Okay, excellent. And I saw you put the group IO emails here. So if you guys haven't signed up for these emails yet, I think that would be a really good idea. We're working on getting our communication channels sorted out. So just as a reminder, those are now also in the notes.
Yeah, those ones are specifically for code conduct violations, security issues that come up or technical, but I'll also pop in the main list for Cardea so that we can better communicate updates through that main list. So I'll add that as well.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, and so one of the office hour discussion points is going to come up again. So maybe we'll just hold on that exactly what we want to cover there, how many we think we need, and things like that. Because I think the other note that we've discussed is about kind of lowering the barriers to entry, right? If you were to join this call for the first time, we're in the weeds. We've brought everybody with us and assumed that they've participated since the beginning, but that's not necessarily the case. And so if you want to start to participate, sort of where do you start? So before we totally jump into that, is there anything else you want to touch on, Mike, in terms of Interopathon readiness and tech updates? Or are we good?
No, I think we're good. I think we can mention other stuff later on if we need to.
Okay. Okay, excellent. So then sort of shifting the conversation to how do we, I labeled it lowering barriers to entry. And I think one of the things that we've discussed is that the website isn't quite clear enough for those who come for the first time and want to try to understand what's happening here. So one thing that Trevor's been working on is a new website. I don't know, Trevor, if you want to talk about that and the motivation there.
Sure. So, and I mean, it kind of overlaps with the issue of how, we've made huge advances in, the link is in the chat for anybody who wants to look at it. We've made huge advances in developing the code base. And I think going ahead, there may be less to talk about technically, but there's an awful lot now to be done in marketing this product. And the current, at least homepage, doesn't, it's very much an in-group, in the weeds sort of, I know my way around LFPH and GitHub kind of publication. So we want to create something that has a much, has a marketing message. Because as we go out with as we start talking publicly about the trial we've done and the recent trial we've done and the forthcoming trial, there will be a surge of interest from commercial and and governmental and NGO entities in what we're doing, and we need to have a way to capture them and explain how they can get involved and use Cardea. So the messaging shifts very much to a marketing one, and this is just a draft. Anything here is, if you want to scroll up, Keela, anything here is open for change. This there's the blue bar would be potentially where we would put the logos of all the various companies that are using or developing Cardea, subject to their agreement with that. And then we would set out the problem statement, which is more or less what the next section is. Again, all this language, all the points being made are open to discussion and refinement. Then we would move from the problem statement to a little bit about the background, what it is about Cardea. I know CETA now want to claim a much bigger public role in their development, which is only due, as this wouldn't be happening without you know, all the effort and they've put into working to develop Cardea. And then it would end with either, you know, 3 ways to get started. The language here, grab the code, go make magic, comes from Sam. Office hours, how to get started or join the developer community. Now, Helen also suggested that you know, it might be, we might also tag these with beginner, you know, beginner, intermediate, and advanced, as a further way of signaling where you should go, what your journey should be when you get to this page. So that, I think, is definitely worth discussing, as well as alternatives. And then also, which isn't in this, maybe we also have a section which are vendors that you can contact. So obviously the office hours thing preempts the next part of this discussion, which is that, but let's parcel that out and maybe talk a little bit about the website kind of wireframe and what's needed, what's working, what's not working, any suggestions.
Yeah, I would say that things that we've talked about sort of offline, Trevor, that are come to mind are that the problem with sort of onboarding newcomers to an open source project is not necessarily a new problem. I think, you know, Hyperledger's tackling this with, you know, folks coming to India and Aries and Ursa, and they're offering some now trainings to get started that Indicia is offering specifically for that reason, because it's really hard to, you know, jump into a project sort of mid-develop. But I think a top bar, a menu would be helpful on the page to direct folks to LFPH, GitHub, and then, like, you know, the sections below, even the, you know, the groups IO to join, you know, join now, like a big button that says join now, and then it takes them to the groups IO. So I think getting a menu in there would be great. I think, yeah, like you said, putting in some other buttons. Like, I know that there's a history that needs to be written for CETA that will, I think, live in the GitHub, but maybe having that button in the history section. So there are definitely some kind of clicky things that need to be added to the different sections. But I think it's a great start just to, you know, signal or help explain what this project is in relation to, say, you know, I don't know, like any sort of travel organization, business, enterprise is curious about picking up and using it. It should give them clear, actionable steps to use it, join it, learn more about it, etc. And I think this is a great start.
Yeah, I agree. Helen, I think that's a great point about the navigation. And I think, you know, one of the things is to not lose the links that the old website has or that the current website has, right? So maybe sort of breaking it down to say, if you already are heavily engaged and you're just looking for the quick references, go here kind of thing, and then navigating from there.
Right, so that's a good point.
Right, so that it does continue to be the place where everybody's going, regardless of their role, right? So I sort of, as we were talking, Helen, I was just saying, so top menu, we can have these like references, and then maybe there's a, you know, where to get started, and then if you're already a participant kind of thing. Okay, and I think that one other thing that we had talked about in a previous meeting is to really break down for people the roles or the players that are part of this engagement, right? If you want to be a holder or a verifier or you probably don't want to be the holder, but the verifier or the issuer or the government entity, like sort of who are the players, and you can kind of dive into that and understand those actionable steps. If I play this role, here's where I get started, and kind of use it as a visual map of where am I and how do I go from here. And I think outlining use cases, right? If we're trying to paint the picture for what this is and how people can use it in all of the different, I mean, right now we're sort of hyper-focused on one use case, but I know through this community, we have many use cases. And I think trying to paint the diversity of what it can be used for would also help. I don't want to distract from the primary focus, but it certainly has applicability across industries.
Yeah, this is Christy. I agree with that. I think showing those case studies at a high level can be really helpful and really draw in more people and grow the community. So I think that's important. I have a quick question. So I understand that we're kind of putting the problem to be solved or the question near the top of the website, but I may have missed this. Is there somewhere where we state the mission? Are we going to state the mission statement or the purpose and the solutions? Am I missing that? And sorry if I am.
I think we should make a note.
Well, it's I mean, the very opening image notes it's the world's only complete, decentralized, easy to integrate open source ecosystem for verifying health data that preserves patient and traveler privacy.
Maybe
yeah, that states what it is, but maybe expanding the view of, I understand you can infer it, right?
Right.
Definitely people, especially if you're in this space, you're going to infer that. But as someone like myself coming from the outside, it took a while, and it still is taking me time to understand enough to explain it to third parties, explain it to other people. And so something simple, a simple language for us non-engineers or people who are in the space. But for personally, I'm coming from a legal background and an innovation background, but I don't have the knowledge and skills that this team has. So I'm learning all the time. And so I know the people I've worked with at Indicio have been great at giving me 101 level information and then and growing from there. But I do see this space growing, and I think there will be a lot of people like myself that might need a little bit more breadcrumbs,
Okay, for other people on the call, what might that mission statement and those breadcrumbs look like?
Well, this is Christy again. I have a question. Do most people that you encounter understand decentralized identity? Because some of these just basic terms are not widely known. So such as decentralized identity.
We're all too close.
Yeah. So Christy, thank you. I had started, I did a little outline before we jumped on today's meeting, and I had this sort of introduction to Cardea with like, let's put the trust triangle on there, right? We have to assume people coming don't understand it at all. Like, let's draw a trust triangle, and then we can use that trust triangle to say, okay, I want to be this person. Let me click in here and go learn more.
That's a great idea. That's a great visual aid that especially for my purposes outside Cardea, I have to kind of plug and play with those roles a little bit. They can change, like the same players can have different roles. And I know that's the case here too. But that's a good visual. That could be a good place.
So this is RJ, just a quick question. Don't we really look at Cardea as a second level Linux Foundation project that's building off of 3 or 4 other projects? So Aries and so on and so forth. So instead of us recreating the wheel and build this content, shouldn't we just reference back to some of them just so that we don't spend so many cycles on it? Just a thought.
I think that's smart. I
think
agree.
some-
Simplicity.
I think some references are appropriate, but I also think that we need to have a certain amount contained on the website, because if all you have is a link and you click over there, it's instantly overwhelming.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I know one thing that we have been talking about at Indicio is creating much better information graphics about the whole information flow of Cardea and similarly decentralized identity solutions. And that's a real priority. And though such a graphic would be super helpful. Again, I even think, I know the trust triangle is one that is brought up a lot, but I'm not even sure that isn't confusing to people who or not necessarily intuitive to people who come to this topic. So we are, raring to go in hiring good graphic talent to turn the information flows into something that's very easy to follow and grasp.
Two more basics to add could be kind of a tech stack one for the more technically inclined that could help reference the included technologies. We might want to have something that discusses what is a schema or credential, because that's a core concept that is new to the web and these technologies.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we had talked about as well on offline was a white paper. And so being able, if we had kind of went through a lot of these items and described and created the content in the sort of the process, the mechanism of making a white paper, I think we would get a lot of the content and the points and the sections that we need to include on the website and pull from there. So it might be worth working as a community to write that white paper, what Cardea is, where it came from, what it all, what decentralized identity is, what an issuer is, what a holder, blah, 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 and go through a couple of use cases, et cetera, and then pulling from that and creating the website from that white paper.
Yeah.
I like that idea just because I've done that in my own businesses, and I found it very useful. And just as was mentioned, just the term credential, I had to come to understand what that meant. And so, yeah, if there's a white paper, something, and I like 2 levels of information, right? The rudimentary information and then more advanced information. And I'm a big fan of keeping things simple, but I'm so excited about this project and this community and the potential that I think it's good to put simple content out as simple as possible, but be as engaging as possible for the different levels of people who are going to become involved.
We may want to describe us almost like a kid's story of Alice and Bob going to the airport or to get their medical credentials or something like that.
Yeah. And that's where I think a good graphic artist will be a super help to all of us.
I have a meta comment here. Cardea is the best organized project that I think we've ever seen that takes the underlying technologies and actually applies it to a vertical. So this problem of helping like normal people understand what we're talking about in the context of the vertical that we're addressing is, I think, something that we're going to end up doing kind of a lot in the broader identity community. And so I bring this up because number one, I think that these are common issues that are going to happen with most vertical efforts to, open source efforts to try and bring something into a vertical. The other one is that I think in the future, there will be more common things that we can point to that are better oriented towards the challenges that we have on explaining how this all works to folks. But in the beginning, there's definitely a need, and I think I'm trying to expand a little on what Mike said. There's definitely a need to include enough context right here such that people can begin to understand it without having to go jump to other projects to sort of understand the underpinnings and the basics and that stuff. So I see this happening again. I'm applauding our list here because I think that these sorts of things are going to be the template for future projects that try to do this. And I hope in the future that we don't have to bear all of that burden ourselves, but I honestly think there's going to be a lot of that burden to bear because we're leading an application to a vertical in this way. Yeah, so that's a better word, Mike. We're trailblazing the application of the underlying nerdy tech into a real life thing. And so there's going to be, I think, more than a little bit of our fair share in this process, but that's going to bring success to the project.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that we continuously remind ourselves that we can't stay steeped in tech land, and we have to be able to talk to normal people about what is it and how does it work and why is it a good solution and how can it be implemented in whatever ecosystem they're operating in, right? Because we need the whole ecosystem. We need to bring a lot of people with us.
Well, and in particular, we're going to end up having people come to Cardea that aren't sold that doing this open source is the right way to do it.
Right.
Right. They see the solution and we're waving the open source banner, which to some people attracts that, them to the project. And other folks are like, whatever open source, does it solve my problem? And I think we need to remember that people arrive at this from all sorts of angles. Because we're nerds, we ended up being here because of open source, but that's not what the future is, right?
See, and that's really smart. I think that's a smart perspective because I have the perspective I have because I've worked in legal for many years, doing license agreements and building projects and implementation projects and working with people like you who have the tech background and utilize open source. And I see all of the legal challenges of working with open source. But over the years, I've learned the value of utilizing open source. And so I think it's right to have that perspective. And something else I wanted to mention is I go out and try to evangelize these concepts with my customers, my potential customers in the sports industry, and utilizing this type of technology and platform to track data rights management, tracking data rights for athletes and others that includes the data itself, the name, image, and likeness, or what's traditionally been known as the publicity rights, and then now NFTs, non-fungible tokens. That's a big sell, and those are big concepts. And I've had to work with a couple of individuals at Indicio that they can help me present this information in a way that people can understand just what you're saying, that this application is right for them, or that the whatever platform that we're building, utilizing these components, is right for them. And I've been pretty successful of simplifying it, so they kind of catch the vision. But these are very new concepts to people, and I presented in the last month or two to a company that has met with several blockchain companies that are trying to build something similar, but they were blown away by what we can do when I partner with Indicio. And so telling the story to different players in the space repeatedly definitely is a thing. That is what I have been living for the past year, trying to provide this very complex idea with a new vocabulary to people who are kind of in the trenches in where we're going, but they still don't see the vision or know what to call it.
Okay.
This
All
is
right,
great
so-
input. Thank you.
So just to kind of list out what we've gone through here. So we had talked about a top menu, I think talking about the roles and the players in the ecosystem. I think talking about an ecosystem first is important. The use cases, which can continue to be expanded on, explicitly listing the mission. And I think, one important thing that I heard here was really talking about why open source and how that really can be useful. I think we need to put something on security for those people who are going to be security conscious coming here, making sure that we talk to them. General terms and background on decentralized identity, again, to lower the bar of entry so that people can understand even basic concepts. The trust triangle, which can be linked to those roles we mentioned, and then references to those larger building blocks that this has been built off of. And then in terms of other ways to reduce the barriers to entry is that white paper. And then I'm calling it sort of the visual or basic story version of what is this and how is it working. I think
Maybe add a video as well. People love videos. But if we're, thinking about in terms of content, introduction to Cardea content, white paper, visual, video, would be great.
Yeah. And so we had talked about doing some little training videos, right? Because I think, and to get back to what Trevor was saying on the website, right? We have these, sorry for my scrolling, if we go down here, we have these office hours. That's a very high cost, let's say, just in terms of scheduling and time and making sure people are always available for those office hours. But if we create the equivalent of office hours, like here's Cardea 101, somebody talking about it and navigating the page and sharing their screen in a pre-recorded video about how do you get started and what do you need to know, then those can be watched at the leisure and convenience of whomever's trying to engage. And so I think coming up with this content around, let me watch a video and learn, somebody can talk to me about Cardea and I don't have to be in a scheduled office hour, I think is going to be really valuable. And then we can have fewer office hours for those people who continue to have questions, or maybe they don't like the self-service model.
I like that. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because I'm proactive. So I go out and find your videos and watch them so I can catch up and get up to speed. And so even if you just link to your YouTube page or, something like that, because again, you have a lot on your plate already. And, it can grow in phases, right? The content can grow in phases. You don't have to have everything from the get-go. You can utilize and leverage what you already have.
Right. And so if we were to kind of design those mini lessons, let's call them, do we want to make just a list of sort of what we think needs to be on that? I think it's what is Cardea, like a high level overview of the project and some introduction. How to navigate the Git, I think, is an important one. Where is everything? What do you need? How do you get started? Anybody have others that they, I think, are important for right now?
We might want to just have a video of walking through using one of the agents.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, well, we can start there. And
I think this may be the part of the what is Cardea, but I wonder if the basic Alice and Bob story that was in the outline up above could be included there. And that way people understand a little bit of the technical underpinnings, trust triangle, what the flow is actually like as part of the introduction to Cardea at all. I think that would be a really nice foundation to stick people on.
Excellent. Okay. Okay.
There's an excellent video that was produced by one of Aruba's partners for the original launch of the CETA trial and the Cardea project back in April and May. And it was a really excellent video at kind of explaining the whole travel workflow that I just remembered. And, we probably, I don't know if we probably don't want to use it directly, but it would probably be really good inspiration for something like that. So
excellent point. It's always easier to riff off a draft or something else than it is to start from scratch.
Okay. Excellent. And I think, as we go through that, we can even have those mini videos for different use cases, right? Because the problem with demonstrating it in one use case is then sort of people put you in that box. Okay, so we're talking about travel, right? But that isn't, and that is certainly what we're talking about most importantly, but there is applicability for other scenarios here. And so I think the more diversity we can get, or the simpler we keep it originally, will allow people to sort of say, oh, I could be this, or I could do that, or I could put it in this use case.
I just popped a link in the chat. Trevor and I actually went through a sort of customer journey definition exercise together before the break. And it really talked about the sort of issues that people are having and why they would come to Cardea, what they're looking for. And we defined their, like the villain or like the thing that they're most trying to overcome as that any data has to be verified for whatever reason or in order to achieve whatever their mission might be. So it is quite broad, but it's that ability to verify the data in whatever context that we're really trying to drive home. So I put the link in the chat there. Feel free to pop in some suggestions or whatever. But I think that it might help also when we're going through making a website to sort of see what the friction point is, what the solution brings, and then we could help define that plan, that process for them when they come to Cardea and what they're trying to do.
Helen, I don't see anything in the chat. Can you just make sure you sent it to everybody?
Oh, I sent it to Chrissy Gale. Sorry.
No problem.
There we go.
Excellent. I will put it in the notes as well. Okay. All right, excellent. Any other comments around kind of being able to reduce the barriers to entry and participation, including in this group?
Well, there is what we also, the question is whether before we have all of this wonderful content which is, there's quite a lot of work here, is whether we should move technical meetings to bi-weekly and then just advertise a sort of an open meeting every other week, so that, if people show up to discuss, it's people show up to discuss.
I think one thing that might make sense to me, Trevor, and I'm curious about other people's opinions here, is to say like the first meeting of the month is an introductory review, right? A high level, where are we? What have we done? And then that gives people an opportunity to come to that as the sort of a kickoff. I don't know that every other week for that is necessarily needed yet. I don't know. Other thoughts?
Yeah, first Thursday of the month or something would be easy to implement, and then sort of the second and fourth are the technical conversations, and then we skip the third or something.
If you have an introductory meeting, if you have two technical meetings, you could have some kind of flex meeting where it's like, all right, we're going to do a walkthrough or a demo of a particular thing, or we're going to talk about a use case, or we're going to review a concept, or something that's not directly in a totally from scratch introduction is also not necessarily bytes and code,
Maybe like a marketing meeting focus where it's like demo or discussion or whatever the case may be. But I could see some like collaboration being helpful on those Thursdays.
Well, given that we need to okay, I see it's written down here. Good. Yeah.
That look right?
Yeah, I think that's good. And then do we want separate, or do you want to just stick with the same group invitation email?
We can go through on Groups.io and delete the sort of the current standing. Every single Thursday has the same Zoom, and we can modify the subjects for those calendar invites so they reflect this schedule. So they're kind of separated, so that if one series gets disrupted or moved around or something, that it won't disrupt them all.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this modified schedule?
Just to follow up, Helen's, are we planning to use the same Zoom link for all of them?
We can, yeah.
I I think that's a good idea. I do like the splitting the calendar stuff like Helen was talking about, but I think that using the same Zoom link to minimize confusion, and that way, if someone shows up on the wrong week or something else, they still get the same people, right?
Yeah, that we can definitely do. Okay, excellent. All right. I think just while we're on, I had another thought, which is on the videos is something, we need a video on the reference implementation, especially as we start to get prepared for the next Interopathon, how to navigate interacting with that reference implementation.
I'm not entirely certain how that's different from the demonstration videos. 'Cause
agents
we would be
using
using the reference implementation for the video.
Okay.
If we're speaking directly to the Interopathon, then you may have videos that are, not necessarily a demo, and also not necessarily just getting started. It might be here's how you would modify this part of the code, or here's where you would go to add a feature, or here's the structure of all the folders and stuff, beyond a Git pull and a Docker compose to start the thing. What do you do next? So there might be some videos like that. Kind of a dig into the code kind of thing.
Okay. All right, excellent. Okay, any other ideas or comments on how to reduce these barriers to get people engaged?
We also talked about doing just, again, posting more regularly on social media and interacting more from the Twitter and the LinkedIn accounts, posting the meeting, kind of coming up soon, the sort of pre-meeting announcements happening, in 1 hour, and then the videos, the recordings, posting those as well. So the more we all as a community can interact with those videos and share them with our networks and our, through our channels, that'd be very helpful as well.
Okay, excellent. All right. Last call for ideas, either for the website or other tools around reducing those barriers. We've given Trevor and Helen a lot of work to do today.
Well, just one question. I mean, at what point do we wait until we have the bulk of all this work done to put out the new website? Or do we float it out in bits and pieces?
You might want to outline a navigational structure or flow that would support all of it, and then roll it out as it's ready.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm always a fan of put whatever information out there that you can that's usable, useful, and it's not burdensome or cumbersome. But I think just add as you go, so people have something to reference.
Yeah, I agree on getting the framework down and kind of what the vision is for the website. And then we can start making things clickable and accessible and expanded.
Okay. Well, maybe for the next meeting, we have a little bit, we try and at least get the architectural structure of the website ready so that we can launch it and people can comment next week. So maybe that's that's the goal, at least the marketing communications goal for next week.
Excellent. Okay, and then if we're going to stick with our new schedule, which we can try to pivot to our, which week are we in? Then next week will be a technical discussion. We'll make sure that we've got an agenda for that. And we can also, I think one of the things that we can also be doing more and better on is to get those agendas out a little bit more in advance and kind of lay out the schedule of what we'll be
Yeah.
talking about at these meetings, which I think will be helpful for participation. So I can challenge Ken and I to get that schedule drafted.
So in 2 weeks, we could look at the on the marketing call. Then at the third Thursday, we can look at the website, and then I should have an outline for the white paper, just like a very top level outline, and we can start kind of filling bits in at that call as well.
Great. So that's in 2 weeks. Okay, excellent. Alrighty, I think then we might have gotten through everything. I think this was very helpful discussion to hear from everybody. If you have other comments that occur to you after the call, just feel free to reach out and we can get that, or you can come to the notes and add it yourself, get that documented. Otherwise, hopefully this will get us moving in the right direction around engagement. And I think, you know, we've started to measure some of that engagement. So we'll be able to also see if we've been driving any change once some of these things have gotten implemented. All right, so with that, we can get everybody 10 minutes back today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you guys. Hope everybody has had a wonderful start to their new year. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we will talk next week.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.